In Europe during the Middle Ages, the Huns are advancing westward, bringing war and destruction everywhere. The Kingdom of Burgundy struggles to survive, and now the king must ride out with his men to protect the borders. The land is shrouded in fog, so the army moves carefully. They arrive at a village only to find it burned to the ground, with every person and animal lying dead. Suddenly, a horse passes by, revealing a hidden enemy soldier. The man shoots an arrow at the king and rides away before they can capture him. Marshal Hogan rushes to the king's side, but it's too late. The king is already dead. A funeral is later held in the capital. Hogan, overwhelmed with guilt, reflects on his childhood. As a boy, he survived a terrible attack from a beast, escaping with only a few scars. Afterward, the king took him under his wing. Later, while Hogan is training, Princess Kriemhild assures him it wasn't his fault, and reminds him that he is still part of the family. Soon, Prince Gunnar ascends the throne and holds a council to discuss the kingdom's dire situation, as they are surrounded by enemies. Desperate for allies, Gunnar decides that his sister will marry the king of Lombardy. Hogan delivers the news to Kriemhild, and though she agrees to do her duty without hesitation, it is clear that the decision pains her deeply. That night, during a storm, 11 armed men are spotted camping near the gates. When Hogan climbs the wall to take a closer look, he sees a shadow whisper, "I know your scars," before vanishing. By morning, the group passes through the gates, and the soldiers immediately surround them. Watching from afar, Kriemhild notices one of the riders subtly change his face. Gunnar agrees to meet with their leader and discovers he is Siegfried, Prince of Casentine. Their fathers were once allies during the Old Wars. To everyone's shock, Siegfried challenges Gunnar to a duel. The guards immediately surround Siegfried to protect Gunnar, but Siegfried agrees to remain as a guest instead. In private, Kriemhild tells Hogan about what she saw and wonders if that person is an old one, an evil being that haunts people's dreams. She believes her brother should have sent the group away. That night, Hogan keeps a watchful eye on the guests. A cloaked figure leaves the group and wanders through town, so Hogan follows him. He manages to corner the figure in an alley, but when he grabs his shoulder, the shape collapses into nothing more than a pile of bags. Meanwhile, Siegfried has drunk so much that he stumbles into the street to vomit. Hogan approaches him and warns him to leave the kingdom. Later, when Hogan goes to bed, he is plagued by nightmares. In his dream, he sees the mysterious guest standing in the stable, surrounded by blood. Hogan tells him he isn't afraid, explaining that the old ones have already taken everything from him, including his fear. The being tells Hogan that he knows his scars and how he got them, triggering a childhood memory of losing his parents during a dragon attack. In the morning, Hogan learns from the servants that the cloaked figure had been seen in the stables, and several horses were found dead. The survivors are terrified, and Kriemhild tries to calm her beloved horse, but it breaks free of the rope and bolts away. Hogan and Kriemhild mount other horses and give chase through the forest until the runaway stops at a river to drink. Kriemhild approaches carefully and tries to pet him, but the horse panics again and injures her hand before escaping once more. Hogan tends to her wound, and during the moment she admits she is unhappy about the upcoming marriage. Sometime later, Siegfried tells Gunnar that he has been traveling because Brunhild, the queen of the Valkyries, called to him in a dream. It is said she has the power to cast spells on men across the world without ever meeting them. The moment is tense, but suddenly Siegfried laughs, claiming his story was just a prank. He then complains about the lack of women at the table. That evening, Siegfried bursts into Kriemhild's room. He tells her she is beautiful, but Kriemhild rebukes him, saying he has no respect and calling him a lost soul, forcing him to leave. Meanwhile, Hogan tells Gunnar that he doesn't believe the marriage is a good idea and assures him that their army is strong enough to stand on its own. Gunnar trusts his judgment and agrees to cancel the plan. Still, he remains troubled by Siegfried's story, as he doesn't believe it was entirely a lie. The following morning, Gunnar informs Kriemhild that she no longer has to marry, and she embraces him with joy. The queen then tells Hogan that her daughter had been ready to sacrifice herself for the kingdom, and she wonders if Hogan is capable of making such a sacrifice as well. Later, while Hogan is training with his soldiers, Siegfried appears with his own men to train alongside them. Their brawling looks more like a street fight than the sparring of trained knights. Siegfried loses control and brutally beats one of his own men, forcing the others to pull him away as he laughs like a maniac. He then demands a new opponent from the local soldiers, and Hogan steps forward. When Siegfried hurls a spear at him, Hogan catches it with ease. Hogan reminds him that they are training for war, not games, and tells him to take his antics elsewhere. The moment is interrupted by the arrival of a riderless horse carrying a dead body. Upon closer inspection, they discover the man was from a nearby border settlement and had been stabbed to death. Moments later, Gunnar is informed that the Saxons and the Danes have turned against them. While the capital remains secure, the rest of Burgundy is destined to burn. Desperate for allies, Gunnar orders Hogan to form an alliance with Siegfried's group, even though Hogan disapproves of the idea. Later, as Hogan searches for Siegfried, he spots the cloaked figure sneaking through the shadows and finds strange objects on the ground, items that appear to be part of a ritual. The cloaked being finally reveals himself as Albert, insisting that he knows who gave Hogan his scars. Albert explains that Siegfried once fought a dragon alone and killed it. Afterward, he bathed in the creature's blood, which made him nearly invulnerable. However, a single leaf had fallen onto his back, leaving one small patch of skin untouched. That spot remains Siegfried's only weakness. Albert goes on to reveal that he has been hired to forge a sword from the dragon's bones. He then furiously accuses Hogan of allowing Siegfried to stay in the castle, saying they have given him exactly what he was looking for. for. A family? Meanwhile, in the chapel, Gunnar's prayers are interrupted by Siegfried and his men. Siegfried presses his sword into Gunnar's hand and vows to kill for him. When Hogan arrives in search of them, he finds Gunnar announcing that Siegfried is now an ally. Later, Hogan goes to bid farewell to Kriemhild before departing for war. She asks Hogan why he saved her from the marriage, considering the kingdom needs allies, but Hogan refuses to answer. Kriemhild tries to bring up the feelings between them, but Hogan insists he did it to protect the kingdom. She replies that their home will never truly be safe. The next day, the army marches to war. When they stop to camp for the night, Hogan discusses strategy with his men. He points out that while the Saxons and Danes are brave, they lack discipline, and the army must take advantage of their chaos. Bored by the meeting, Siegfried leaves to rest in the forest. Gunnar joins him and asks about the Valkyrie story. Siegfried explains that the queen calls to the warrior within him. In the middle of the night, Siegfried rides out alone and attacks the enemy. By morning, everyone is shocked to see him return, carrying the severed head of the Saxon king. He explains that the Saxons will now come after him, but without a leader, they are disorganized, making it the perfect opportunity to strike. The army is eager and follows Siegfried into battle, ignoring Hogan's concerns. Soon, a vicious fight erupts in the forest. Hogan kills any enemy that comes too close, but his main focus is finding his king. Siegfried fights without mercy and without armor, leaving a strong impression on everyone. When Hogan notices one of his young soldiers has lost his helmet and is about to be struck down, he rushes forward, kills the attacker, and passes his own helmet to the young soldier. The battle rages on, with both sides suffering heavy losses. Hogan spots his best archer surrounded and moves to help, only to find himself encircled as well. He can only watch in horror as the archer is stabbed to death. This distraction allows an opponent to strike Hogan in the face, causing him to lose his left eye. Hogan brings the attacker down but collapses in the process. The Dane king charges toward him while Alberic watches from his corner. Suddenly, Siegfried leaps in and kills the king before he can reach Hogan, who passes out. When they return to the capital, the crowd cheers Siegfried's name, grateful for the victory. Siegfried throws himself into their adoration, reveling in all the attention. Meanwhile, Kriemhild tends to Hogan, who is still unconscious. Frustrated, she goes looking for Siegfried and finds him drinking. She scolds him for disturbing the mourning of the fallen, but Siegfried insists that death is part of war. Fallen warriors should not be honored with silence. He believes they should be celebrated. When he asks about Hogan, Kriemhild admits that he may be dying. Siegfried responds that Albert can help him. Moments later, Albert tends to Hogan's wounds, drawing a mysterious symbol on his body while revealing the truth. It turns out Hogan's childhood story was a lie. He actually comes from another kingdom, one that was attacked and conquered by Gunnar's father. His parents were killed and Hogan was trapped in the fire. The dragon that appeared actually saved him, carrying him away in its claws, explaining his scars. The king later used the dragon as part of a cover-up to hide what really happened. When Hogan finally wakes up, he visits the graves of the fallen soldiers. Siegfried tells him that he regrets nothing. Later in the throne room, Kriemhild finds Siegfried, who remarks that empires always collapse and that they are not fighting for power. He explains that this is why he never wanted his father's throne. Kriemhild is impressed by his lack of desire for power. While changing Hogan's bandage, Kriemhild admits she is grateful to Siegfried for saving Hogan's life. However, Hogan thinks Siegfried is giving people false hope. Kriemhild points out that even false hope may be better than no hope at all. Over the next few days, Hogan is heartbroken as he watches Kriemhild and Siegfried spend a lot of time together. One morning, they ride into the forest to admire the ruins of the old wars. Kriemhild asks why Albert follows Siegfried, and Siegfried explains that Hogan killed Albert's master. He also recounts the dragon story. Siegfried had become a blacksmith's apprentice because his father wanted him to learn discipline. However, the blacksmith had sent Siegfried to the valley, hoping he would never return. After weeks of wandering, Siegfried discovered a sleeping dragon and thought it was the most beautiful moment of his life. Kriemhild cannot understand why he killed it, but Siegfried refuses to answer. On their way back, Kriemhild keeps hearing a voice calling her name. Siegfried tells her to ignore it, but when she turns around, she sees her father's body covered in vines. She runs away in horror, and when Siegfried follows, she admits that she is starting to forget her father's face. He had tried to sell her to a stranger, and for a time she hated him for it. Overwhelmed, she has a breakdown, and Siegfried comforts her. They end up bonding closely and sharing intimate moments. After they fall asleep, Siegfried has a nightmare and almost harms Kriemhild, but he wakes up just in time. Meanwhile, the Huns continue to advance through to the west under the leadership of Etzel, spreading death and destruction everywhere. Gunnar receives word that Lombardy has fallen and grows desperate for more allies. Remembering Siegfried's story, Hogan concludes that they must contact Queen Brunhild of Iceland. A council member brings this news to him, expressing strong disapproval. Brunhild is part of the Old Ones, practitioners of dark magic who were once driven from the land. The council member explains that Gunnar has heard the queen's voice in his dreams and believes it is a trick by Alberic, so he has imprisoned him. Hogan visits Alberic and promises to free him if he shares information about the Valkyrie queen. Alberic explains that Brunhild is invincible, and Siegfried was drawn to her because of it. He had been hearing her voice in his dreams and decided to visit her. The queen took a liking to him, and they spent a year together. But one day, Siegfried disappeared without a word, breaking her heart. Alberic believes that Siegfried still loves her. When Hogan opens the cell to free him, Alberic is gone. The next day, Hogan warns Kriemhild not to trust Siegfried, but she ignores ignores him and announces that she will marry Siegfried to protect the kingdom. A worried Hogan brings the news to Gunnar and asks him to set a condition. During dinner, Gunnar gives the couple his blessing, but with one stipulation. Siegfried must guide him to Iceland so that Gunnar can request the queen's hand in marriage. This way, the Valkyries would become their allies as well. Siegfried is furious, but has no choice but to agree. Soon, Gunnar and his men set sail. The first few days are calm, but the cold eventually begins to take its toll. One night, a sudden storm hits, and the crew struggles to keep the ship under control, while Siegfried laughs amidst the chaos. Unfortunately, the ship crashes into rocks, and several men, including Gunnar, fall into the water. Hogan jumps in to save his king. By morning, Hogan reaches the shore and is devastated to find the bodies of his friends scattered along the sand. At least Gunnar is unharmed, and they reunite with a hug. After finding Siegfried and a few survivors, the group continues their journey on foot. They travel for days until they reach a boggy area. Remembering the rules from his last visit, Siegfried orders everyone to put down their weapons. Suddenly, soldiers surround them. Siegfried asks General Senua to take him to the queen. The group is tied up and transported to a castle beneath a volcano. As soon as they cross the gate, the locals shout at them and begin beating them. Bags are placed over their heads and they lose consciousness. When Hogan wakes up, his bag is removed and he finds himself in a large room with Senua. She explains that to win the queen's hand, Gunnar must defeat her in battle. Many have tried before and their skulls lie in a pile nearby. Afterward, Hogan is allowed to see Gunnar, who wields a sword given to him by the queen. He explains that she is nothing like the stories say and that he will have to fight her. Meanwhile, Siegfried is visited by Queen Brunhild, who gives him a sword as well. Siegfried swears that he only came as a guide and that he will marry the princess, but Brunhild points out that he still came of his own free will. Sometime later, the group reunites outside the castle, and Hogan scolds Siegfried for not warning them about the rules. Hogan wants to leave, but Gunnar announces that he intends to stay. Even Siegfried protests, saying that not even he can defeat Brunhild. Gunnar refuses to change his mind, so Siegfried calls Alberic for help. They enter a cave, and Alberic takes Siegfried's blood by cutting his weak spot. Then he pushes Hogan and Siegfried underwater, while Gunnar drinks the blood. Gunnar squirms in pain, but gasps in relief when the duo drowns. It turns out that Gunnar has temporarily gained the strength of both Hogan and Siegfried. Afterward, the guards prepare Gunnar for battle. Senua warns him that if his blood touches the snow, the queen will take his head. If her blood touches it, she will leave with him. Gunnar finally faces Brunhild in battle. She proves to be an exceptional warrior and quickly knocks off his helmet. He surprises her by blocking and dodging her attacks, holding his ground in a fierce fight. After several minutes of clashing, blood finally falls onto the snow. To everyone's surprise, it comes from a cut on Brunhild's leg. Gunnar immediately releases the borrowed power, allowing Hogan and Siegfried to awaken in the cave. Brunhild and her army fall to their knees, determined to honor their part of the deal. When it's time to leave, Brunhild bids farewell to her land in tears. Eventually, the group returns to Burgundy, and Gunnar is devastated to learn that his army could not hold the borders. The Huns have destroyed most of the kingdom. Soldiers are deserting, and villagers are hiding to avoid being conscripted. With urgent need for allied armies, a double wedding is held. Siegfried and Kriemhild are happy to marry, while Brunhild and Gunnar appear cold and distant. Brunhild refuses to let the priest crown her, and instead places the crown on her own head. Later, while everyone is preparing for battle, Kriemhild vents her frustration by attacking Siegfried. She beats him in front of the entire army before screaming in anger. The night before the battle, Hogan notices that his soldiers are fearful and hopeless. He gives a stirring speech to inspire them, urging them to follow the queen because she will protect them. The next morning, the army sees Brunhild's volcano erupting in the distance and takes it as a favorable omen. As the battle begins, Brunhild charges ahead, and no one hesitates to follow her. The fight is brutal, with death covering the field, but Brunhild's leadership drives her army toward victory. Etzel witnesses her overwhelming power and is forced to retreat. That evening, a huge celebration is held to mark their victory. While everyone dances and drinks, Brunhild and Siegfried dance too closely and eventually leave together, a scene witnessed by Hogan. The next morning, Hogan notices that Brunhild and Siegfried are still flirting openly. Hogan approaches Siegfried in private and tells him that he will tolerate this on the battlefield, but Siegfried must remain loyal to Kriemhild when they return. Siegfried hugs him and promises to treat the princess well. Over the next few weeks, the kingdom enjoys peace and focuses on rebuilding. However, Siegfried grows bored and asks Kriemhild to run away with him. She refuses, saying that she belongs there. Later, Kriemhild asks Hogan why he never married, and he insists that he always had more important duties. They share a tender moment, acknowledging that they will never be together. Meanwhile, in the throne room, Gunnar learns that his people are still losing hope because they lack the manpower to tend the farms. Siegfried steps in to help, but Gunnar resents how the locals favor him and scolds him for interrupting. Later, Gunnar tells Hogan that he is worried about Brunhild because she ignores him and instead looks lovingly at Siegfried. He asks Hogan for the truth of what happened, and Hogan assures him that they only fought once. One night during dinner, Siegfried is extremely rude to a councilman, harassing him until he leaves. A furious Gunnar yells at Siegfried, saying he hasn't truly become part of the family yet. When Siegfried attempts to start a fight, Hogan intervenes and stops him. Later, Gunnar sees Brunhild riding out of the castle and follows her. The next morning, he tells Hogan that Brunhild and Siegfried have been meeting in secret. While the people continue to to adore Siegfried. He comes and goes without regard for anyone's feelings. Gunnar fears that Siegfried will destroy the family, so Hogan resolves to do what is best for the kingdom. Meanwhile, Siegfried apologizes to Kriemhild, yet he continues to get drunk in taverns and pick fights. One day, Hogan invites Siegfried to go hunting, and together they bring down a white stag. Hogan has several chances to strike Siegfried with a surprise attack, but he refuses. Instead, he gives Siegfried a sword and asks for a fair fight. Both are formidable warriors, and they continue clashing for several minutes. They manage to disarm each other and resort to punching. After a brutal struggle, Hogan holds Siegfried's head underwater, only for Siegfried to stab him in the leg. The battle continues, and Siegfried eventually brings Hogan down, putting his sword to Hogan's neck. At the last moment, Gunnar surprises Siegfried by stabbing him in his weak spot, finally ending his life. Hogan then tells Gunnar to ride ahead, insisting that no one should know he was present. He notices Alberic observing everything, but when he approaches the shadow, he sees only a tree. Hogan returns to the city with Siegfried's body, claiming he defeated him in a duel. Kriemhild has a breakdown while revealing that she is pregnant. In private, Brunhild also suffers a breakdown. During the funeral, Hogan defends his actions, insisting that he did what was necessary to protect the kingdom, though he remains open to punishment from Kriemhild. Instead of executing him, Kriemhild curses him to live long enough to serve Siegfried's son, a fate she says will cause him more suffering than death. And with that, the story ends. If you like the story, please subscribe to channel.